Let me start by asking you get your first look at the Kevin Durant Nets in a regular season game last night against Golden State. You know, Tom, it's always tricky to try to jump to conclusions after only one game, but overall, how does it feel like these pieces fit together for the Nets?
Oh, they look great. They look like they fit together seamlessly, Kyrie and Kevin Durant, and not just that, the Karis LeVert off the bench dynamic where the Brooklyn Nets looked like a well-oiled machine last night that was seemingly playing games for 2 months behind the scenes that we just didn't know about. They looked so good offensively. They came out just guns blazing. They didn't seem to miss a shot for the first 10 minutes of the game. And it's not just the results that I noticed. It was just the freedom of movement. It was the chemistry. It was the passing. It really did look like a Mike D'Antoni, Steve Nash, visionary team that just seemed to assemble overnight. And I was worried about this team in terms of Kevin Durant's rustiness coming off the Achilles injury, hadn't been playing it for essentially 2 years. But, man, they looked really, really sharp. And I think the lesson for me, Jim, is, you know what? Let's check in 3 months because I am interested more so what the Brooklyn Nets look like in April and May, more so than what they look like now. Because with Kyrie Irving teams, they do get off to great starts, but it comes playoff time, these young players that played really, really well early in the season, it starts to wear down. And I think that's going to be the key, is not getting too high off of like an early season success, but also not getting too low when it comes to like the Golden State Warriors and making too much of that stinker last night.
Tom Haberstroh joining us. I agree with you. The Nets looked amazing last night. So what about Golden State? Through the first 2 preseason games, for instance, Steph Curry was averaging 13 threes per game. He had 10 last night, and there had been the suggestion that we might see an MVP-level Curry once again. Can you see that? How do you think that he shows up this year?
I am buying all the stock in Steph Curry this year with one conditional, that Draymond Green is healthy. Because you cannot grade this Warriors team without Draymond Green and Steph Curry making music together on the floor. It is so apparent that the chemistry was like Marilyn Manson in a Sunday church mass when you're seeing, Kelly Oubre and Andrew Wiggins trying to play with Steph Curry for the first time. They just lacked any sort of electricity that you have come to learn and love about the Golden State Warriors under Steve Kerr with Klay Thompson, Draymond, and Steph. It just was completely gone last night. And, he struggled to make his shots, but more importantly, it just didn't seem like there was a flow and that they could get him the ball in the places where he'd succeed. And if we know anything about Draymond Green, it's that he knows where Steph Curry wants the ball, and he is their top assist guy, and it's almost impossible to grade the Golden State Warriors without their defensive player of the year and their assist leader on the floor. So I do think it was an embarrassing output, and I think Steve Kerr would admit to that. It was an embarrassing output in the season opener. He expected a lot more grit, a lot more physicality defensively, but offensively it was just untenable. I mean, an 88 offensive rating is just it's out of this world for a Steph Curry-led team to have an offensive rating that is subterranean. It is just awful. I could not believe my eyes at how poorly they looked offensively as well. But Draymond Green is the elixir that makes everything work, and I think it is very hard for people to watch that team last night and not go in a knee-jerk response about what we're going to see from Steph Curry this year. And I just would warn people, wait until Draymond Green, who is very much the catalyst in the open court and getting stops the way the Warriors want to play basketball. It does not happen without Draymond Green. And unless he's healthy, I just think Steph Curry's job becomes a lot harder.
Subterranean is a great way to describe that. Tom Haberstroh is joining us right now. Tom, let me jump ahead. What about the James Harden situation in Houston? How do you see that playing out?
I wonder if the NBA is going to step in here soon, because it is an awful look, not just going out and partying, and that being blasted on all the channels, whether it's social media or TV or what have you, and that being a headline story, but it also is a horrible look that it seems at least purportedly, that James Harden believes he is above the COVID protocols that the NBA has set forth. And I would not be surprised if the NBA comes down hard on James Harden here if it is deemed to be an authentic video of him partying at a nightclub in the middle of, the season trying to get going, because that would be an egregious violation of the protocols. But also, I think they need to set him as an example of, it doesn't matter if you're an MVP. It doesn't matter if you're the face of Adidas. Like, we're all trying to get through this together. And one misstep from James Harden could mean that several teams will lose games. If James Harden or any other player decides they are above reproach and that they're not going to follow protocols, that could shut down the league for a week. It could shut down the league for potentially longer if there's an outbreak as a result of that. So I think the NBA at this point has to be mulling whether they're going to do anything significant here in terms of punishment to set an example. We are at the starting line. We are at the starting gate of a very long and potentially tumultuous season. And I think establishing the tone would be very important to do, because right now, James Harden, it is not a good look for the NBA, and it is certainly not a good look for him and his trade prospects if he's doing this as some sort of way to force his way out of Houston, because I think other teams looking at the situation are going to say, do we really want to get ourselves, in the midst of that? Do we really want to deal with that and the fallout of that? And that may make the wheels less greasy and make it a lot more difficult for the Houston Rockets to comply with James Harden's trade demand.
Tom Haberstroh is joining us. He's a national NBA insider. Let me ask you a couple of things before I let you go. The Heat have such a strong culture. Every time we talk about them, that's the first thing that comes up. In fact, Tom, every time I talk to any coach or GM or front office person in literally any sport, the first thing that comes up is culture, chemistry. I want to ask you, as somebody who has spent a lot of time looking at analytics, what do you think when you hear people talk about culture?
Well, I've always ascribed to the notion that winning breeds chemistry, not the other way around. I think a lot of times we post hoc, when a team wins a lot of games, we suddenly notice that they have good chemistry. We rarely talk about the teams that are struggling in a 5-game losing streak and say, wow, they've got great chemistry, don't you think?
Right.
Like, that's the cognitive bias that we do when we talk about sports, is oftentimes when they go on a win streak, we suddenly notice that you're smiling on the court, where I think it's a lot of times when you're succeeding, it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun. The Heat, they have established a culture in which it's a workman's, lunch pail attitude where, they're gym rats and it's very professional. But I do say, remember, it's a lot about your personnel too. And having Jimmy Butler as the face of the organization, taking the baton from Dwayne Wade, is super important. Whereas before, they had Hassan Whiteside and Dion Waiters and these other, headaches from a locker room standpoint, soaking up a lot of the oxygen in that locker room. So now that Hassan Whiteside and Dion Waiters are no longer part of the team, and now it's Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, Heat culture is so much stronger now, because they can focus on the work and not deal with the extracurriculars.
All right, so before I let you go, there's no way that you and I can talk without me asking you about your mom, Patty. How is Patty doing? Patty
is doing great. She actually just got a tracheostomy, which is one of those things that are super scary for ALS patients. She has Lou Gehrig's disease, and she just got transported to a wonderful rehab facility. It's Christmas season, and we're in tough circumstances as a country, as a globe. But I do think that having her around and just knowing that she's okay is super important. And I would encourage people to look at ALS Pepper Challenge and the work at ALS TDI to learn a little bit more about ALS and what it does to the body and what it's important this holiday season. If you're interested in giving, check out ALS Pepper Challenge. Learn more about what we're doing as a family and as an organization. And I think it's something that during the holiday time, people should learn more about that story, about what we're trying to do. So thank you for bringing it up. Mom is doing wonderfully. 3 years into the ALS battle, and we can't be more excited about having her around in 2020 and as we look into 2021.
I'm really glad to hear that, Tom. I'm really glad to hear that, and I want to also reference the fact that you have raised something in the neighborhood of $1 million through the ALS Pepper Challenge, and not just the money raised, but the awareness and even legislation surrounding ALS. You've done an absolutely amazing job, so give Patty our best. He is a national NBA insider. He is host of the Haberstroh podcast, and, of course, the creator of the ALS Pepper Challenge. Tom, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, great to have you, and I know we'll do it again soon.
Thank you so much, Jim. Right back at you.
You too. Tom Haberstroh. Great job.